For 80 years, one nation held the world in its hands. They printed paper, and the world gave them oil. They issued commands, and nations obeyed. They were the masters of the universe. But empires don't collapse with explosions. They collapse with handshakes. This week, something unprecedented happened. The most powerful nation on earth went begging to the very enemies it swore to destroy. There is an ancient rule in geopolitics that has never been broken. You can be an empire or you can be a debtor, but you cannot be both. America is about to learn why. Inside these walls, a man named Scott Bessent is facing an impossible nightmare. He is the new Treasury Secretary, and his job sounds simple: sell government bonds to keep America running. For decades, this was the easiest sale in history. Every nation on earth lined up to buy American debt. It was considered safer than gold, more reliable than any promise ever made. But this year, something broke. America needs to borrow $3 trillion just to survive the next 12 months. And for the first time, nobody's buying. To understand how America reached this moment, we must travel back 50 years to a handshake that changed the world. In 1974, the United States made a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. "We protect you, and you price all your oil in dollars." Every nation that wanted energy had to hold dollars first, and America controlled the supply. This was the petrodollar system, the invisible empire. It meant that every barrel of oil pumped from the deserts of Arabia, the jungles of Nigeria, the fields of Venezuela, all of it flowed through American banks. It was the greatest economic deal in human history, and for 80 years, it worked perfectly. Venezuela sits on the largest oil reserves on the planet. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than anyone. And for years, America tried to control it. They froze bank accounts. They seized airplanes. They recognized a shadow president named Juan Guaido. They even put a $15 million bounty on Nicolas Maduro's head, like something out of a Western movie. The goal was simple: collapse the economy, force regime change, take the oil. But something unexpected happened. Maduro survived. And in surviving, he proved something that terrified Washington more than any military threat. When America sanctioned Venezuelan oil, they assumed the world would stop buying. They were catastrophically wrong. China kept buying. India kept buying. But here's the detail that haunts the Treasury Department. They didn't pay in dollars. Venezuela became the first laboratory for a post-dollar oil market. They sold crude for Chinese yuan, and increasingly for cryptocurrency. By trying to strangle Venezuela, America accidentally taught them how to breathe without permission. The sanctions didn't destroy Venezuela. They gave the world a blueprint for escape. Here's something most Americans don't know about their own country. The United States has plenty of oil. Texas pumps millions of barrels every single day. But it's the wrong kind of oil. American crude is what they call light sweet. Easy to extract, easy to refine. But those massive refineries on the Gulf Coast, the ones that power the entire American economy, they were built 50 years ago to process heavy, sour crude, the kind that comes from Venezuela. Without that heavy oil, the refineries choke. Without the refineries, diesel runs out, and without diesel, America's entire supply chain simply stops. So now, the unthinkable is happening. American diplomats are quietly flying back to Caracas. The same government that tried to overthrow Maduro is now offering him deals. They're issuing special waivers to companies like Chevron. They're offering debt relief. They're essentially saying, please, please turn the pumps back on. This isn't diplomacy. This is surrender. It proves something that will reshape the 21st century. The United States needs the Global South's resources. More than the Global South needs America's permission. But if Venezuela is embarrassing, what's happening with China is absolutely terrifying. Remember that $3 trillion America needs to borrow? Secretary Bessent has to find buyers, and he's running out of options. Japan used to be the biggest buyer. but they're selling American bonds to save their own currency. Europe is stagnant, fighting their own recession. American banks are already stuffed with government paper, sitting on massive unrealized losses. There's only one buyer left on Earth with pockets deep enough to save America. The same country America calls its greatest enemy. Here is the absolute comedy of America's position. And if it weren't so serious, you would laugh. On one side, you have politicians screaming about trade wars, threats of 60% tariffs, generals planning for conflict in the Pacific. But behind closed doors, in rooms where no cameras are allowed, the Treasury Secretary picks up a red phone to Beijing, and he begs, "Please don't sell our bonds. In fact, please buy more." Because if China decides to stop buying, or worse, if they start selling the hundreds of billions in American debt they already hold, interest rates explode. Mortgages hit 15%. The stock market, addicted to cheap money, collapses entirely. The United States is trying to hold a gun to China's head, while China holds the deed to America's house. Secretary Bessent knows this. He's a hedge fund manager. He understands leverage better than anyone in Washington. He knows you cannot declare war on your own banker. So while news channels celebrate how tough America is being on China, the reality is precisely the opposite. America is trapped. They need Chinese money to fund their deficit. And Beijing knows it. They're watching Washington sweat. They know that without their money, the American dream can't even pay its monthly mortgage. When you combine Venezuela and China, you see the complete picture of collapse. For 50 years, American superpower rested on two pillars. Pillar one was the petrodollar. The world priced oil in dollars because they had no choice. Venezuela just proved you can break that pillar and survive. Pillar two was the sacred Treasury bond. The world gave America their savings in exchange for safe returns. China is proving those returns aren't safe. And those savings can be weaponized against you. In 2022, when America froze Russian reserves overnight, they told the world something terrifying. The dollar isn't a currency, it's a political leash. And now, the consequences are arriving. While Washington runs around fighting fires, a new world is being built without them. Brazil is selling food to China in yuan. India is buying Russian oil in rupees. Trade is flowing through systems that don't touch American banks at all. The BRICS nations aren't trying to destroy the dollar. America is doing that perfectly well on its own. They're simply building a lifeboat for when the ship finally sinks. The United States isn't invited to the new table, and for the first time in history, they can't afford to buy their way in. America now faces a choice between two devastations. Option 1. Default on their debt. Tell the world, we cannot pay. This would bankrupt the global financial system instantly. Option 2. Inflate their way out. Print the money they cannot borrow. Devalue the dollar to make their massive debt pile seem smaller. History tells us which path they'll choose. Inflation is the politician's way out. It's the slow death instead of the quick one. And, whether you're watching this in New York or Nashville or Nebraska, the price of saving the American empire will be paid by your savings, your groceries, your energy bills. The unthinkable deals you saw in the headlines this week, they're just the beginning. The era of the dollar is closing. The era of the real economy is returning. This isn't a threat to be feared. It's a return to balance, a return to an economy based on what you can grow, build, and extract, not on weaponized paper promises. The United States will call these new arrangements strategic cooperation and humanitarian gestures. Don't be fooled by the headlines. When you're an empire, you dictate terms. When you're a debtor, you accept them. And right now, Washington is accepting terms from the very people it swore to destroy. Here is my advice to you, America, and I offer it not as an enemy, but as an observer who has watched empires rise and fall. Do not listen to what your politicians say. Watch who they shake hands with, because while they talk about strength and dominance and American greatness, They're shaking hands with the people who hold your debt and your oil. The transition has already happened. The world just hasn't realized it yet. 80 years ago, a promise was made. The dollar would rule forever, but forever has an expiration date. And America, yours is here.